Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Taking the Lead, our video podcast where I have the joy of spending some time and having a dialogue around leadership with some of the most respected leaders in the public relations, communications, and marketing fields. Sometimes there's an extra joy when you get to introduce and spend time with a dear friend, and that's what we're doing today. We're going to be speaking with Elise Mitchell. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a three-time company founder, including Mitchell Executive Communications, which is her leadership training and facilitation and coaching services company, Velocity Collective, and I'm forgetting one, but she'll tell us. She was, after an amazing career as an entrepreneur, growing Mitchell. She was then asked to be CEO of the Dentsu Aegis PR Global Network. She's been the president of the International Communications Consultancy Organization, and she is a board member or advisor to 5 organizations. Last thing I want to tell you about her, she's the author of a great, eminently readable leadership bestseller, Leading Through the Turn. If you haven't bought it yet and read it yet, what's wrong with you? Buy it now. Buy this book now. It's wonderful. I could tell you more about her, but we're just raring to dig in with my good friend, Elise Mitchell. Welcome to Taking the Lead.
Hi, Ken. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's always great to see you.
Good to see you too. So we're going to jump right in. You know, as we both know, a number of PR agency executives, some are friends, have made the leap to executive or leadership coaching. Why did you do so?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ken. I feel so fortunate that I was able to pivot in my career. So I no longer work in PR and marketing and communications, which, by the way, the company I think you referred to is Mitchell Communications Group, which was the PR firm.
But just the one with your name. How did I forget?
Okay, that's okay. So my PR firm, Mitchell Communications Group, was sort of my big entrepreneurial ride in that space. And so I did sell to Dentsu and was with my parent company and with Mitchell still for about 7 years after the sale. It was a great experience, but I knew in my heart I had one more entrepreneurial thing in me. And so I was hearkening back to a second company that I had built in the 2000s with a very dear friend of mine. It was called Executive Communications Consultants. We did training, facilitation, coaching, built that company for about 8 years and sold it. And I thought, I really did love doing that. And so to your question, I think it really is such a kind of a natural pivot for a lot of people that are in the consulting world to think about pivoting to coaching. It's not exactly the same thing, of course, but for me, it was a sense of, I was so happy in the PR and marketing world, helping clients solve problems, leading teams, helping people to be their best. And I also sort of asked myself the questions like, what is my greatest contribution to the world at this stage of my career? And I really did feel like it was, I would have given my right arm to have had a confidant and like a Sherpa, if you will, somebody who walked down the path of entrepreneurship who could help me, because leadership, as you and I both know, is such a lonely place to be. And especially as an entrepreneur, it's quite lonely. And so I thought, if I could be that for another leader, I didn't want to be the leader anymore, but I thought if I could help other leaders to be their best selves, to show up at their very best, because of course, as a leader goes, so goes a company, a home, a church, a community, an industry, even a country. Leaders have such an outsized impact on the world. So I thought, if I could help leaders show up at their best, I just can't imagine anything that'd be more valuable for me to do at this stage of my career. So that's the pivot I made.
And we're all fortunate you made the pivot. Those of us who have made the pivot, I think we're all so thrilled. And as wonderful as being in the agency business was, I'll tell you, for me, as far as fulfillment level and satisfaction level, doesn't come close. Doesn't come close.
Totally agree. It's more rewarding.
It's just amazingly rewarding. So to that end, so why do you think, and we can be both immodest here, why do we think former PR pros, former PR counselors and leaders, why do we make such great coaches?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. And I do think it gets to the heart of what we were all trained to do as PR professionals and trusted advisors is, I think first thing is, one of the things I loved the most was helping people think through challenges, solve problems. It doesn't have to be a crisis necessarily, it just might be something really complex and interesting. I loved that, trying to figure out how to put the pieces of a situation together to solve the problem in a new way or to address some sort of, persistent issue that the client can't seem to solve on their own. I love doing that. I just think that's so intellectually challenging and stimulating. And I think a lot of PR professionals are just naturally very gifted at that. And then also, I just think that combined with that intellectual capacity is this desire to be very empathetic, good with people. We read the room really well. A lot of PR professionals really own the room because of their communication skills. So that you kind of combine those two things together, and it really kind of creates a magical skill set that allows you to work with leaders in any industry. And that's what's kind of cool about coaching, as you and I both know, is I love working with people across different sectors, different size companies. It's all so interesting because you also see that a lot of leadership problems are the same no matter where you go and who you are and what you do. You see a lot of the same patterns. So being able to help those leaders manage themselves well under pressure, which I think PR professionals do quite well too. You sort of have a lot of ingredients that would lead you to be really good at leadership and executive coaching.
Yeah, I always say leadership is leadership is leadership. For me, even though the bulk of my clients come from the worlds of PR and marketing and communications, we're generally not talking about PR, marketing, and communications in a true coaching engagement. We're
talking not at
about
all.
The things you mentioned and how they lead themselves and how they lead others and how they're showing up every day as a leader. Because you got to lead every day, even when you don't feel like it, right? You still have to.
Especially when you don't feel like
especially when you don't feel. Sorry, that's the title.
Right.
The other thing I'd layer on, I'd like to think that most PR executives who get to a certain place in their careers, we've got to be good listeners. My goodness, we've got to be good listeners, and we've got to know when to listen rather than talk, and when to ask that other question, and when to let that question, the answer, just settle there and just be there for a moment. And there are times when, I'm sure you've experienced this, where rather than tell, you ask, and you just sense that energy and the light bulb going on for our clients. And we realized, had I told, it would have been my story and my choice. But if I ask, it becomes theirs.
Absolutely.
And I've given them so much more value.
Yeah. There's so much neuroscience around that, is that we are much more powerfully committed to and excited about our own ideas, not everybody else's. And so, like you said, by asking a question to prompt an insight in your client's mind, or in our case as coaches, in the coachee's mind, prompt the question, get the question to prompt the insight, then they have that moment, that aha moment of discovery, which is so exciting for them. Is wow, look, I came up with the answer. Yes, you did. You had the ability all along. It's a wonderful gift to give to your clients as well as to your coachees.
Yeah, and I think it's then you really have buy-in and commitment and collaboration. The one thing I learned actually not long ago, the part of the brain that we light up when we ask a question, we always know collaboration, action, creativity, all those things. It's also where memory lives. So when we're working with clients and they say, I don't know what's going on with this executive. I know I've told them 3 times, but they're not doing it. Well, that's not their fault. You haven't lit up the part of, without judgment, you haven't lit up the part of the brain where their memory resides. So why don't we try a question instead? So I'm going to ask you another question.
Okay.
How's that for a segue?
That's
We've
good.
gotten through, at this point, my goodness, close to 2 years of uncertainty. And who knows when we'll return to normal, what the normal, next normal, new normal. We've run out of normals. So based on all of that, what do you think are the most important skills a leader must hone to lead their followers and their organizations through, potentially more uncertain times?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ken. It's funny. I do. Thank you for mentioning my book, by the way. I still actually do a lot of keynote speaking, interestingly, but I'll tell you the number one topic, it's not going to be any surprise to you, but the number one topic I get requested to speak most on is leading through change. I have a keynote address called Getting Comfortable with Complexity, which I always think raises lots of eyebrows because people say, like, I don't know if that's even possible. And yes, I know it's a challenge, but you have to your point of your question, you have to get comfortable with complexity and uncertainty. And this is really where leaders sort of are really showing up at their very best. We've certainly seen that in the last 2 years. Leaders sort of rise to the occasion because it is still so difficult. And there's a lot of skills that I think are sort of just core in all of us as leaders that we've got to have. The one I've sort of seen people develop a little bit more recently is this willingness to be more agile. This idea of, well, I really liked the way I did things before, it really worked for me, but it's not working anymore. What do I do? So sort of this ability to say, okay, I can kind of, stop being mad about what's changed or denying change or resisting change and say, okay, this is my new reality. I got to figure out, like, what are the most important issues for me to focus on? Where are the most promising opportunities? Because, of course, in the midst of disruption usually comes your best opportunities to innovate or change or pivot. You look back at the 2008, 2009 sort of financial meltdown in the worldwide, that was where a lot of opportunity and disruption occurred that was for the good. And a lot of PR firms actually did quite well in that time. So sort of seizing the opportunity requires that agility and willingness to let go of things that we maybe loved or trusted and say, those things aren't working for me anymore. How do I be more agile? And I guess coupled with that too, Ken, is a sense of being willing to be decisive. This is so hard for leaders who like certainty and like control because they want everything to go just the way it should in their mind. But life doesn't turn out the way that it should. It turns out the way that it does, and so you've got to have sort of courage to step up in leadership and be as decisive as you can be, knowing in your mind, hey, I'm smart enough and I've got great people surrounding me. We're smart enough to figure it out as we go. I need to make a decision to move us forward, and then we can just adapt and adjust as we need to in the moment, which of course is good motorcycling principles. As right. I'm an avid motorcyclist, but I've always loved that theory, which is you've got to go into the situation the best you can. Just have the confidence that you can figure it out as you go, as long as you are moving forward. So being agile, being decisive, and probably also being a little bit more inspirational than you might have felt you needed to be otherwise, to see a vision, have it clearly articulated, and give people a sense of where we're moving toward that gives them hope and gives them a bit of courage and a bit of confidence to say, you know what, I'm not exactly sure if this is going to work out, but I feel inspired by this leader's vision and I want to go there and I'm willing to stay on the ride to see what happens next.
We've learned in both leadership and in coaching, we used to talk about how do I motivate my team? And I think we've learned we can't motivate our teams. They have to motivate themselves, but we can inspire them. Mm-hmm. And if we inspire them with an ambitious vision, then they will self-motivate.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's a little bit of, both have to dance there at the party.
Yeah. But I'll quote Kim Sample, I hope I'm quoting her correctly, of the PR Council. A vision with truly ambitious goals galvanizes a team to action.
Yeah, that's great. She's so smart. I love her. She's such a great leader. She was so great at her firm, and now seeing what she's doing at the PR Council. Wonderful. Terrific.
Last question. So good news and bad news. Good news, agencies, PR, communications, marketing have more business than ever in 2022. The bad news is they don't seem to have the teams to staff it and deliver the results, and they're losing people, and it's so hard to attract. So what's the most important thing agency leaders can do to lead during this big quit?
Boy, I see this happening in every single agency that I am coaching. I know you're seeing it too. And it's funny too, Ken, it's happening at every level. You're having these really senior people that are walking out the door, as well as mid-level, and then not even be able to find the junior level talent. It's created a lot of question marks in my clients' minds. But I do think it's kind of maybe a twofold way of thinking about it. first, I think you should always look in the mirror and say, you know, what am I doing that's maybe contributing to the problem? Am I building that culture that I really think that people would say is a great place to work? And I ask them to know that for sure that my culture is a great place to work. If not, what needs to be addressed? And then also, like myself as a leader, am I being empathetic? Am I being knowable? In other words, am I making myself vulnerable and transparent to my people? Am I really, to your point earlier, sitting and listening to them, kind of walking the halls, talking to people, communicating often? I mean, all of the things that some leaders are more uncomfortable doing these things. You know, and I've had them say to me, what do you mean I have to have yet another town hall? How many town halls do I need to have? And I'm like, well, you know, you just have to ask yourself if you are being the type of communicator that you need to be as a leader, both listening and speaking to them and sharing the right types of messages and information with them. So always looking in the mirror at yourself first. And then I just sort of like this idea. I've been reading a lot about this recently about re-recruiting your employees, which basically is the folks that have walked out the door, you may or may not get them back as boomerang employees, but let's say that they are gone. How do you sort of stop that exodus? And it makes you wonder if, am I doing enough of a job to make my employees feel loved, appreciated, valued? Have I checked in with them to know what else they want from me? A lot of times it isn't just the money, because I do think people are being giving a lot of spot bonuses and pay raises and things like that. But it's, for example, have you invested in my career development? Or I want a chance to get to the next level. How can you help me, you know, with that career pathing to make sure that I'm getting the professional development or the exposure to clients or new industries that would help round out their resume? Because then they would begin to say, well, if I'm being paid well and the culture is good, the only thing that might be missing is a chance for me to really develop my career. And so if I don't have to leave to get that, then you really are producing a pretty enticing package for your current employees to stay. And I think that's a great place to look.
Yeah, I've been telling our clients, rather than planning exit interviews, why don't you plan a stay interview?
Oh, I love that.
Really find out
yeah.
what would keep you here and avoid the exit interview.
Right.
And, you know, just ask, you'll find out. You may not be able to give them everything they want, but you may be able to give them some core things that will encourage them to stay. And everyone who stays, all your talented people, that encourages others to stay. And everyone who leaves sometimes gets your other good people thinking, there's another world out there. So as busy as leaders are, I encourage all our viewers, start booking stay interviews.
Yeah, I love that, Ken. It's great. And I coupled with that is, do I do a good enough job of celebrating the anniversaries of the people who have been here long term? Mm-hmm. I think that says a huge amount about your culture to say, here, we have a 10-year employee. Let's really stop and celebrate this person and all the highlights and the contributions and how they've grown. It does, as you said, sends a message to everybody else saying, wow, somebody stayed here 10 years. There must be a reason why. You know, if I'm a relatively new employee, that becomes, those people have a chance to role model what a tenure looks like when somebody has stayed around a long time. And
I think that can also be effective in recruiting as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
I love that. Yeah, you can do that on social media. You can
how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, just go to my website, elisemitchell.com. That's the best way. You can get me there, or Elise at elisemitchell.com. I love to stay connected with everybody. And I'm out there on social media too, LinkedIn and, Facebook, Instagram, all of the above. So love to stay connected with folks and learn. We can learn from each other. We stay in community.
Sure do. I've learned so much from you. I sort of owe part of my career to you, but we'll have to do a part 2 in 2023, and I'll share that story. Yeah. But at any rate, it has been a great joy to see you again, to spend time, to collaborate today. You just bring joy everywhere you go. You always have, and I so appreciate your spending some time. And folks, keep coming back to Taking the Lead. And if you want to reach me, as you know, I'm at ken@jacobscom.com, KEN@JACOBSCOMM.com. Until next time, keep taking the lead.